evening, everybody. Welcome to Food Fight, where discourse is the main course. Thanks for joining us as we broadcast live from Fox Street Compound. Tonight's broadcast is hosted by yours truly, Mike Spade of Plant the Seed Project. At Plant the Seed Project, our mission is to provide the resources and skills necessary for youth to participate in a global food system. You can learn more about us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Meetup at Plant the Seed Project, or just visit us on our website, www.planttheseedproject.org. On today's menu is a chat about mental health in our food shed. Though most of us eat several meals a day, we usually spend very little time thinking about the people who make it. What happens on a farm day to day as those potatoes from our french fries are harvested? What is the personal well-being of the line cook who prepared them? Thankfully, we have a few guests here to enlighten us about the experience of being a producer in the food shed. First up, we have John Henman from Hensman's Bakery. John, come on down. Thank you very much for joining us, John. How you doing?
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay. So, looking at your manifesto here, so it says, do you mind if I read it, what you start off your meetings with?
Go right ahead.
So it says, hello, food hospitality community, chefs, servers, owners, suppliers, farmers, writers. This group is us helping us. If that means quitting something, it's quitting self-destruction. All that we do crazier than other persons. Drink or drug, work or worry, depress or die. If us helping us means starting something, it's us helping each other to take back our lives. This group is a safe place to come and share, to support, to hear new ideas, to create a community. We work in a dangerous profession. There aren't too many like it. Perhaps firefighting and rock and rolling come close. It can suck every ounce out of your soul. We generally don't do neutral. It's either full throttle forward or full throttle reverse. Our list is less to do than just do. Sure, we cook great meals or make contented tables, but it's often mere more, now. This group can help us slow that down, take a pause, reconsider what matters. Come join us. It's a very powerful statement that you wrote there, John. So what were your intentions when you wrote that, if you don't mind my asking?
My intentions when I wrote this were, actually I wrote it after our first meeting and listening to what everybody said and realizing that we all have these common threads of running on adrenaline, going to the last minute, having this problem with perfection and how it affects us. So that's how I kind of came up with the preamble for our meetings. And if you can come to our meeting and read it like that every time, I would love that.
I mean, if you guys could work out a little budget for me, I'm sure we could work it out. Well, let's talk about that. You said this comes from your experience with food. How long have you worked in food, per se?
I've been working with food in Denver for over 20 years now. I started out washing dishes for Epicurean Catering and just worked my way into restaurants as a job for college on the side, and I was a server until I dropped 12 iced teas on somebody's back, and then next thing you know, I was in the kitchen.
So, would I be correct in assuming that cooking wasn't your first passion?
No, cooking was not my first passion. I think that, I used to think that I got into this on accident, but really, I don't think there's any accidents.
Awesome, well put. So, if cooking wasn't a passion, do you consider it a passion now? And if so, when did it become your passion? When did you realize, okay, I think we might have something here. Like, I think this is something I can do for my career.
I'm very passionate about cooking. I don't know if it's my passion. Cooking became a passion for me when I realized that the industry would support my habits, my behaviors, my un-PC-ness, my adrenaline, my need for adrenaline, which I didn't realize I had at the time, my franticness. So I got really good at cooking so I could stay and survive in that environment.
So it seems like you're saying there were a couple of factors of the food lifestyle, or the food prep lifestyle, that lined up with your interests. For those of us that haven't worked in the back part of a food operation, would you mind explaining what the environment is like there and how it could be conducive to what you were talking about, like the drinking and the wanting to stay out and the socializing?
Sure. And I think this goes back to, we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I said the topic was, we're in the hospitality business, or are we in the hospitality business? We want to put out the perfect meal for you every night, but what goes on in the background, we're like a bunch of pirates. When you go to an event next time where there's a bunch of food booths, take a look around at all the different kitchens that are represented, and everybody's their own little gang of pirates. And it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of camaraderie, and there's also a lot of swearing and a lot of, not being generally nice to each other. There's no pleases and thank yous. It's, kind of in the preamble, it says we just do. I don't care if you sliced your finger off, you got to get that out there, now. And we're really tough and easily offended. We're very sensitive, I think, at the same time, which brings out this toughness. There's a lot of A-type personalities in the kitchen, which makes for a lot of clashing. But at the end of the night, we all come together and put out that beautiful meal on your table.
I'm hearing that there seems to be several sources of stress within the food world that I previously wasn't aware of. Would you mind speaking? What are your main sources of stress when you're preparing food for people, whether it be at your bakery or in your previous experiences as a chef?
I think one of the biggest stresses is letting somebody down. I heard somebody say the other night they went and catered a meal for 70 people by themselves, which is a feat in themselves, but they forgot to bring the basil. And they put on this wonderful meal, and the person went home that night, and all she could think of was, I forgot the basil. She didn't think about the wonderful meal that she put out that nobody probably didn't realize that she forgot that basil, and it's it's the stress of perfection, I think, is a huge stressor on you, and not letting somebody down, not letting your chef down, not letting the customer down, not letting the food runner down, at the end of the night, and not letting your teammates down. I think when you're in the heat of that kitchen, and my stress is today, now that I have left the kitchen and started my own bakery, I'm actually learning how to be a business man, and that's something all new to me. I bought this bakery and I thought, we take the order, we make the bread, we deliver the bread, how easy is that? Oh my God, I'm regulated by the FDA, and what are you, tax man? And I gotta do what? And da-da-da-da-da. I'm learning a whole new thing, plus I have over 20 employees now, which means there are so many lives now in my life. If we don't make it to the next day, not only does my baker, I'm responsible for his paycheck, he's got 4 kids and a wife, that's on my back. And it's how to manage people. That's been a new stress. There's a ton of new stresses on me today that I never imagined I would have in my life, and I call them today, they're gold-plated problems. They aren't problems that I can't solve or I can't call somebody and ask. I have a lot of support in this town for being around for 20 years, so I can call another business owner and say, hey man, have you been here before? I need help.
Wow, very insightful. Thank you for sharing that. So when you were under these stressful situations, how many days a week would you say that you were going home, like, say, this caterer who was distraught that having left the basil at home? How many days did you have similar to that where you'd have a what people may deem a successful event, but at the end of the night, you're at home sitting in turmoil. How often would you say that happened?
Well, she brought that up the other night, and it was a big realization to me because it was every night that I went home with that. You know, we screwed up this. We didn't do that right. With table 23 got totally behind because so-and-so burnt the chicken and threw it off. You know, it's always over a piece of chicken or something silly like that, you know, and that's what you go home with. And to relieve those stresses, you know, in my case, I don't, how can I start this one over? Or, all right, sorry. So in these cases, you know, I was an alcoholic going into this business, didn't know it, but we would go out and we would drink and we would have fun and we would cause a lot of trouble and we had a ton of fun times and we had a ton of bad times, and that's how I dealt with not dealing with the reality in the moment and not looking at who I was, you know. But yeah, it was an every night thing. I always think about where you failed, not your successes.
I feel like that's just sad truth to human life, that we tend to focus on our failures and not our many successes. Are there times where outside of the alcohol, you know, where the alcohol didn't quite cut it? Were there times that you used other substances, or for you was the main substance of choice alcohol?
For me, the main substance of choice was alcohol. I dabbled in other drugs and stuff. I went on a month-long kind of drug binge and realized it really screwed up my drinking. So I really didn't do any drugs. From that standpoint, that's just how that went. I mean, because it was to the point where my body was fueled by alcohol. You know, I wasn't really eating a lot, and I wasn't. I was just sustaining, you know. But my body, when I did quit, you know, I wanted to quit 2 years before I did. But my body, and when I tried to quit, even in 12 hours, I would start shaking, and the pain would be so great that I would just continue drinking, you know, and I could function. You know, I wasn't out of hand. It was just how my body was running. I actually worked better after I had 3 drinks. I was in my prime, you know, as long as I can maintain that level.
Interesting. During this period where you were drinking heavily, how many drinks do you consider to be drinking heavily, and what was a regular day like? Walk me through a regular day of you in the back room as a chef. What did it go like? Do you start with a drink? Do you get straight to work? How'd that go?
Well, near the end is when it got really bad. I was waking up in the middle of the night to have a drink, so I wasn't shaking when I woke up. I'd wake up and sneak a drink in my coffee. You know, I would work my shift. You know, and another thing about the kitchen is you go in at 10 o'clock in the morning, you prep all day long until 4. You take maybe a half an hour break, and then you work another 8-hour shift pretty much to do service. It's like 2 jobs in one day. So we would kind of drink during the day at work, some of us, and then when it came time to work the line, I had a Camelback on that was full of whiskey, and then we had our kitchen bottle, and when we ran out of that, we had a laser pointer, and we'd hit the bar, and drinks would start coming our way, you know. But you know, I can't say that's in every kitchen, especially today. It's a much different environment than it was 10 years ago when I was in my prime there.
That's fair. So I was doing some research before having this talk, and I learned that in the U.S., about 10% of people over the age of 12 have used drugs in the last month. How would you say that compares to the kitchen environment where you work? Do you say on average people were over, under? Was that just about the right amount?
Geez, I don't know much about the statistics of all this, but you know, I would say it's much higher than 10%. You know, well over 50. You know, because you know, like I said, we were kind of a pirate ship, and you know, we would all go out after service. You know, for the most part, and go meet up with the other restaurants, and we had friends in other restaurants, and we would be out all night, and then you had friends at all the bars, and everything was pretty much free. So it's definitely over 50%, I would say. But I don't have any facts to back that up. Just being in it, that's my only experience with it.
We'll trust your experience. That's valid. That's valid here on Food Fight. So next question. That leads me to think about, so you started Mile High Hospitality Hazards. For those of you that don't know, it's a support group that he's created for chefs, line cooks, farmers, and other food workers. What was the event that led to this? This seems like you were having a great time in the kitchen and leading this life. What was the turning point that made you say, okay, well, maybe I need to clean my life up, and maybe I can help some other people too?
Well, I'm 7 years sober now, and thanks. Sober from alcohol and drugs and using that stuff. Sobriety to me today means something totally different than not picking up drinking. It means not losing my mind and throwing my phone across the room, and I'm pretty destructive to my own property. It's not being a jerk to you or whatever. It's showing up as who I am. So that first year of sobriety, I did not want to go back into the kitchens. I had 11 jobs in the first year, and maybe 6 of them were outside the restaurant business, but I just couldn't find my niche. So I did wind up back in the restaurants. I worked for an employer who I had worked for in the past for about 5 years, and he needed some help and brought me back on, and I was so happy to do it. I was my pastry chef. He gave me time, the restaurant he needed. I had a real passion for making pies. That restaurant needed pies, so really developed my skills there. After about 2 years of being in there and being on a 3x5 table, and I didn't want to be in that environment anymore. And it was even the day shift. I wasn't even working the nights, and it was just not nice. And so I just up one day, something happened, and there was a big conflict, and I just said, I don't want to do this anymore. And I walked away from the job that day and called the owner and said, sorry, I can't do this for you anymore. My net worth was probably $150, and I walked away. And I said to myself, I want a 1,000 square foot bakery, and I just want to make pies. And the universe has different plans for you when you have a good plan, and I wound up buying a 11,000 square foot bakery. And now at Hinman's Bakery, we supply about 50 to 60 restaurants in the Denver area, and we do multiple farmers markets, and it's just been a whole new life,
Well, congratulations to you for having the strength to pick yourself up out of that situation. And it's okay. So curious, so you got into a little bit about the start of Hinman's Bakery. How'd that all segue into Mile High Hospitality Hazards?
So I got Hinman's Bakery, which is 11,000 square feet, which in my mind was way too big, So my first iteration was like, all right, I will, let people come in who have small businesses and build what they want to build and create what they want to create and help jumpstart them, give them a chance. And also in the back of my mind, it was a miracle I got to where I got to. I got to the bakery, and I'd seen it in the faces of so many of my other friends, and now that I'm delivering bread to them and going into the kitchens and seeing what's, how it is from the outside looking in, you can just see the pain on their faces and, and how it's going on, and even how they were calling me and ordering, telling me that you have to get my bread here at 9 o'clock and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I don't work for you anymore, So starting Mile High Hospitality Hazards, right now it's a group of about 20 of us. We meet every other week on Tuesday nights. Everybody's welcome to come. And like you read, you know, it's just us helping us. It's a safe place to come and to share your experience and your strengths and your weaknesses. And, you know, it's really hard with these A-type personality people, me being one of them, to stand up and say, I'm afraid. And I think it's a safe place to be able to do that. And I hope that it becomes a trampoline to get somebody else to the place they need for help. In my case, it was alcoholism, and somebody else's case is drug abuse, and somebody else just has straight up depression. But the power of hearing your story come out of somebody else's mouth at you is a really strong power for change.
Wow. So in the time that you have had Mile High Hospitality Hazards, what's been the most impactful story for you?
Well, the first meeting that we had it planned out for about a month, and it just happened to fall on the Monday after Anthony Bourdain's passing. So it was the biggest meeting we've had so far. I think there was 20, 25 people there. And we went around the room, and I just asked everybody to say their name, what they did, and what they had done well for themselves that week. And by the 8th person, that rule was broken, and people started breaking into their story a little bit more. And by the time we got to the end, there was a girl there was actually 2, and they had said, you know, I heard about this group a week ago, and I've been waiting to come here, and I mean, it was really strong. And she said, I was planning on killing myself this weekend, and I went, ding, this is why we're here, you know, and it brought a lot of truth into the room real fast. And it really opened my eyes to the need for this, you know. And we had a plan to do another meeting in the following month, and I said, you know, no, we're going to do one in 2 weeks, you know. And everybody in the group was very supportive of her and got up and gave her a hug and gave them their phone number. And if you're ever feeling so like this again, call me, you know. And this is how the group is kind of forming, is us helping us. So that was the most impactful story so far.
Well, kudos to you. Seems like you're saving some lives over there, Mr. John, and we definitely appreciate hearing that here. But one thing I'm wondering is, with all the work you're doing to help people, how can we as a community best support you? Is there anything that you would like to ask of our community here at Fox, and then, of course, of all the people watching?
Well, thank you for saying that, but I can't take credit for saving lives. You know, I'm just have a space and have the vehicle to do this and have a little bit of a life experience that I can share. So I can't take the full responsibility of whatever this group is going to be, but I'm really happy to facilitate it. Because I want the group to be its own group. I want to be able to go to the group too. I want to be able to participate because I'm crazy, you know. So I need it for me as much as the people that come need it for them. And from the community, you know, it's really a grassroots deal right now. I would just like to get it going with word of mouth. This is very helpful. We're going to start sending more flyers out I'm going to start attaching them to invoices, I think, to the customers, and doing a little more management outreach. But right now, I think it's in its infancy, and, you know, I want the group to start to dictate where the group goes, you know. I think it would be really easy to raise a lot of money and blow this thing up, but I also want it to be a safe place where somebody's not feeling like they're being sent. You know, I want them to follow their heart and show up there, you know, because that's the key to this, because I'm really screwed up in here, but in my heart is the answer. And the longest 13 inches in life are from the head to your heart. And, you know, getting people to start listening to their heart and doing the next right thing is the most important thing.
Wonderfully said. I appreciate you. So, in trying to follow your journey, are you guys on social media? Do you have a website? What's the best way we can follow up on developments with Mile High Hospitality Hazards?
Right now you can find us on Facebook. We have a private page, but I'm not good at the Facebook thing. This is really Alex's area, but I think you can just search us on there, and then you can opt to join the page. And we have been updating that regularly when the next meeting is, and it's not this Tuesday, but the following Tuesday is the next meeting. But we also put up kind of what we talked about at that meeting, so people, you know, if they don't want to come, or it's a very hard time to come, there is no good time in the restaurant business to find an hour to carve out on a Tuesday night at 6:30. So if people want to just check into there and see what was said, make a comment, you're more than welcome to do that. But it's a private page, so you just have to do whatever, and Alex says you're in. So sorry, I'm not really savvy with that stuff so much, but that's how you can find out about us.
That'll suffice for me. So you heard it here, folks. If you want to check out the Mile High Hospitality Hazards Facebook group, go on Facebook. It's a private setting, but feel free to request to join the group. And if you want to check them out, next Tuesday we'll be having their next meeting, and that is July 24th at 6:30. So make sure put it down in your calendars if you want to join. And so, wrapping up here, just have a couple more questions. Based on everything that you've seen, everything we've talked about, are there any recommendations you have for the food industry to spur positive change going forward?
Just be nice to each other, you know? Pause, you know? That's one of the biggest things I've learned is, like, take a minute and walk away. You don't have to answer everything right then. It's just food, you know? In my case, it's just bread. And we're not as important as we think we are all the time, you know, and that's really hard thing to chew on, because most of the time people are coming to the restaurant to go on their first date or to see their friends or whatever, and you know, you forget about that steak that you had. You know that you had a steak, but you don't remember that it came with the blah, 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 and upside down, inverted, whatever we're up to these days with food. I'm pretty simpleton. I love to make cherry pie. That's my thing. So I keep it simple, and I appreciate all the hard work and the thought and everything that goes into food. But, you know, be nice. Give yourself a break. You know, be nice to the person next to you. You know, and it really goes a long way. You know, and pat each other on the back at the end of the night. Don't think about you screwed up table 23. You know, and you're going to live with that for the next week because I'm going to harass you about it. You know, it's table 23. You know. And they left, and they were probably happy, and they're probably coming back, or maybe they're not. So, and get out there and enjoy yourself. Find an hour a day at least, or something, you know, to support yourself.
Terrific advice. Should try and follow that some more myself. We all should. Last question I have for you. So I like to end with a little bit of a fun question. And what I think is fun for me, I had an activity where I went to be a garden educator, and somebody asked me to draw a childhood map of the neighborhood I grew up in. This was about 4 years ago. I still remember vividly drawing that map, and this is of the neighborhood I lived in when I was 5, 6 years old. And when I think back on that map, all that I can remember being there are food places. I remember the Roy Rogers. I remember the Wendy's. I remember going to the Hispanic plot off the block. I remember the Jamaican restaurant. I remember the Kennedy Fried Chicken. You know, food's always been a big part of my life. I was 200 pounds as a fourth grader. You know, I've always loved food. And I can remember, like, very specific meals. I could taste some of them. So I'm always thinking about food. So my last question here, if you could take a Back to the Future car and go back to any meal in your life, what meal are you going back to, and what was it?
God, this one has rattled me. You sent me these questions ahead of time, and I'm like, ay, ay, ay. And there's a couple, but I make pies for a living, and the coolest thing about making pies is when you feed somebody pie, they'll give you a story every time about their grandmother, about something, you know, and that's about what I do. So less than a meal that I can remember an event that we did on a yearly basis. I grew up in upstate New York, and the maple farmers would come and actually tap our trees in our neighborhood and stuff like that. And at St. Patrick's Day at the ski area every year, it was like build your own sled race, and the maple sugar farmer would come and they would pack these troughs with snow, and then he would come with this hot maple syrup and pour little dots into it. It was called Jack's Wax where I was from, and we'd get like a little stick, and you'd stick it in there and wind up this hot syrup, and it would be on this stick, and you would just suck on it like a lollipop, and there's such a fun day every year. We looked forward to that, and the sleds, and it was just out of I just remember the flavor of that maple syrup, and I think that's what I would love to go back to again.
Yeah, I hear you there. I lived in New Hampshire for a year and was fortunate to get to go to a sugaring house and make some maple syrup. And I will tell you, we started the morning doing shots of syrup, and by the end of the day, we were drinking full 16-ounce cups, just downing them. So that taste of maple syrup just stays with you, especially if you've never had it fresh. Go get you some fresh from a tree, fresh tapped maple syrup. Yes, you will not forget the bellyache or the sugar rush. But, John, it's been a pleasure having you here. I just want to thank you so much on behalf of myself, Food Fight, everybody here at Fox Street Compound. Thank you so much for coming out. We'd love to have you again. And it's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
All right. So once again, I'm Mike Spade. He's John Henman. He wants some cherry pies. Stop worrying about table 23. Get on down to Henman's Bakery and get you some cherry pie. John's waiting. And in the meantime, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Meetup, Plant the Seed Project. We'd love to hear from you. That's all coming from Hive Industries. Come hear what all the buzz is about. Thank you.